Hey folks, Ted from Immersion here, and I highly recommend that you go take the survey. I know I made a whole video about just taking the survey myself, but I wanted to bring to your attention something that's been sounding off in my comments regularly, and that is that the survey is apparently wildly different from person to person. I filled it out, basically live during that video. You can see it there. I got certain questions that other people didn't get. Several people are telling me they were asked about how much money they spent on Dungeons and Dragons, and then on what kind of things they spent their money on. Some people were asked for education, some people were not. Some people were asked for marital status, some people were not. But most intriguing of all is something that's apparently hidden behind either some low-level confidentiality agreement or non-disclosure agreement of some kind. Now, I didn't get this, so one, I didn't sign a confidentiality clause or agree to any non-disclosure agreement, but that being said, I also didn't see whatever it is that everyone is describing. But I have received on multiple different occasions from multiple sources independent of one another that certain folks were asked a certain question and then said, hey, do you agree to this whatever agreement? And then they were presented visually with some potential new future product from Dungeons and Dragons. Now, again, I would say take this with a grain of salt, as it is something provided in the course of random DMs or comments or things. However, multiple people over the course of, since this survey has been released, have reached out and told me about this. Again, all independent of one another. So that seems to corroborate the story. However, for all I know, it could be some massive troll event and everybody's doing it. And since I jump on top of news as fast as possible, it could possibly be a big attempt to troll me. I don't think that's the case, but I'll just put that out there as a disclaimer. So, they're describing it as essentially a Wizards of the Coast owned version of some sort of virtual tabletop. Now, it says that people had basically described it as something along the lines of like a Talespire, if you're familiar with Talespire, which we'll go and take a look at in just a sec here. But basically, you would use your phone as a controller, and there would be some sort of digital playfield, whether it's done in person on a TV screen or something like that, or through the internet and through some shared screen. And I would use my phone to be my character sheet, but also to control my digital avatar mini on the screen and move them around. The DM would have their own screen where they could do other things, have maps and monsters and whatever else. Now, they said that it had basically the option to pay for a variety of different things. So I could pay to get access to official content, to potentially maps, and then also to possibly have customization and cosmetic options for my little digital mini avatar. So let's go ahead and take a look at Talespire, which is basically what this is, right? You can see it is a digital area here where you have a digital miniature. There are digital dice. You could build stuff out as you see here. And then all this kind of stuff. So Talespire, I remember when this I think this was Kickstarted a while ago. You can buy it on Steam currently for $25. And they have a dev blog where they show off what's happening in early access and what kind of things you can see. So if you're familiar with Talespire, again, everyone has basically said that what they were shown is very similar in nature to that. What do I think about this? Well, I think I get it purely from a business standpoint. We have websites and programs like D&D Beyond, Roll20, Foundry, Talespire, Fantasy Grounds, all of these things that people are using to facilitate their Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. So whether that be that I play purely online with people that in some cases I've never met in person in my life, and we play online together, or the pandemic happened or something like that, people move away, and we've had to transition to using a digital tool set because we can't physically meet in person anymore, whether, again, it's just a distance thing or a global pandemic event. And Wizards of the Coast has noticed, hey, our numbers went up and D&D is more popular than ever during a time when people can't meet together to roll dice at a physical table. What's going on? And they say, oh, look at all this money these other companies have made. And then they say, hey, we promised Hasbro, who recently kind of crowned us over in charge of a third of the company, basically, that we would continue to rise and almost double our numbers every year. How do we do that? Well, if we can get in a corner on the digital playing field, you know, the digital tabletop and, you know, character creation corner of the market, we could definitely do that. So that makes a business sense to me for them to go ahead and do that. The thing that worries me, and I might have already started worrying you based on the start of this, is what happens to everyone who has bought in to these platforms. Specifically, I would say D&D Beyond. Now, I had figured for the longest time that the next step, the next iteration, the next plans for D&D Beyond would be to develop a virtual tabletop. It just makes sense, right? They've added encounter builders. They already have all the content. It's licensed, and they have probably one of the better digital character sheets out there out of everything we've seen. So the next genesis for that, obviously, for me, would be to develop a virtual tabletop to be able to take that to the next step. So I always figured that's what D&D Beyond is working on. Now, I can't say that whatever this future product is that, no, I personally haven't seen. So again, I can't argue the validity of how close it is to one thing or another, is that they may use D&D Beyond, right? So it might take your D&D Beyond account and then use that. The way people are describing it to me, it doesn't sound like that. I also figure that potentially Wizards of the Coast might try to subsume D&D Beyond inside and buy D&D Beyond so that it now becomes an in-house function. I mean, it also is registered with the name D&D Beyond, so it has the name there. So I figure there's obviously licensing there, but if I'm fully invested in the D&D Beyond platform for books and character creations and things like that, like you possibly and so many others are, do I now need to rebuy all of my books and all of the assets in this new Talespire kind of inspired WotC product? If I want to have all of the maps that I've purchased through D&D Beyond and have my player characters have access to all of the different books, do I need to rebuy everything in this new platform? Will I get a discount if I had D&D Beyond? Will I just get the content for free? Is this the new format that Ray Winninger mentioned? Now, he said it wasn't a digital-only format, but this could potentially be a physical book with the codes for it in this new platform that they're developing. He did say that there was still a potential surprise or two coming this year. Could this new tabletop, virtual tabletop, be what's coming later this year? Or could this be the potential unveiling of a new format come next year? My thoughts are, they're testing this out right now. My problem is, I also feel like it's 10 years too late, right? If you had launched a virtual tabletop and this whole concept with 5th edition, it would be the king and everybody would use it. I mean, that's just how that goes. Like I said, if you launched D&D Beyond and the concept of a digital character toolset and digital purchasing of books with the launch of your edition of Dungeons & Dragons, the most popular edition of Dungeons & Dragons, I think, ever, yeah, you probably would have had everybody buying into that platform from the jump, and it would have felt like second nature. But if you are trying to introduce this now, almost 10 years into the life cycle of your product, I don't think you're going to get anybody to jump ship unless you somehow invalidate all of the other tools that exist and say, this is the only one, and basically shut down everybody else. Now, do I think they're going to do that? No, I don't think they have the means to do that, or I think if they could have, they would have done it already. Or, again, taken their assets back or bought one of the other virtual tabletops to make it a Dungeons & Dragons tabletop, virtual tabletop. What this could be, alongside the fact that the survey was asking all sorts of questions about creatures in the player's handbook, different character races, and what you would change, this could be, again, the turning point here where we start seeing them shift from 5e to a future 6th edition, because now we're asking, what don't you like about the stuff contained in the player's handbook? Future surveys might be, what do you not like about the races? What do you not like about stuff in Xanathar's guide? And we're going through validating or ranking and seeing what people like and don't like about everything that we've released so far player-wise, and all the time working on our virtual tabletop. So when we ultimately decide we're going to launch 6th edition, it comes out with feedback about what everybody liked and didn't like about our system. And then also, hey, it launches with a virtual tabletop. That makes sense to me, but what are you going to do in this edition that's so much better that's going to make people want to switch from 5e to 6e or 5.5 or whatever it might be? I don't know. I am worried at this concept of them working on a virtual tabletop because, one, are you hiring people to do an entire new team to work on this resource, or are you diverting your existing resources to cover that? That worries me, because what part of the game is going to suffer because of that? Now, you might tell me nothing, but I don't feel like that's true. We've seen some spottier releases, both in Unearthed Arcana and in print, where there are questions about, why does this look this way? This looks like it's more of a workshop or a rough draft that made it to print. Why is that the case? Could that be because resources are being diverted to work on this new thing? Now, this does also sound something completely different. It is a technical programming thing, different than a writing aspect, although there might be some aspects to it I don't know. So I am very curious what this means, and if this is true. Also, consider that this might not actually end up being a thing. They're just testing the waters. That's why not every single person has this in the survey that they receive. It's just a select few. And from what people have told me, the ones who received it, there didn't seem to be a common denominator between them about what happened. It was basically a variety of different things, whether they DM or not, or what age they are, what country they're from. It seems to be all over the place. So if this was definitely a thing they were going to roll out, I imagine they would have provided this to everybody. But the fact that they didn't, and it's also kind of hidden behind this NDA confidentiality agreement, means that it's still a prototype, which means ultimately they may decide, you know what, this isn't a viable route for us, people don't like it enough, or whatever the case may be, leave it on the cutting room floor and move on to bigger and better things. So, I don't know. What do you think? Did you get this in your survey? I don't want anybody to send me pictures or video, because I don't want you to breach your confidentiality agreement that you entered into, because I do believe it said, people told me that it said something along the lines of, we will fine you through IP tracing, we'll fine you and see if you actually did, leak this kind of stuff. If someone ends up ultimately leaking it on the internet somehow, I will probably review it, but I'm not encouraging anyone to do so, because, again, you signed an agreement, which in some way is binding, so please do not leak this stuff to me. Do not send it to me. I don't want it. You cover your own ass, and just, if you had it, great. You viewed it, good job. But don't, it's in your best interest not to share these kinds of things. So I am curious what people think about this, though. Do you think that this is a good idea? Do you feel like me, and it's kind of a too little too late kind of a scenario? I mean, if people are invested in these platforms like D&D Beyond or Fantasy Grounds or Roll20, some of these you sank money into, some of these you sink money into as a continual subscription fee, which I also believe is what this new thing that we're talking about would potentially also be, a subscription-based fee with additional purchases for certain things. Certain ones like Fantasy Grounds, everybody needs to have a paid account for it to work, or the DM can buy like a higher level account and a lifetime license and things like that. If you sink all your money into this platform, are you worried that it'll be invalidated? Are you worried that, potentially this new platform could be leaps and bounds above all of them and be the best resource and is the most highest, like the highest production value and has the highest amount of quality over all of them? So it might look, if you look at them all, you may like, damn, that looks way better. Maybe I should go with that. But, is your wallet going to hold you back? I don't know. So it's interesting to see what's coming from D&D. I am curious if this is one of this year's surprises, if this has anything to do with the new format, and ultimately why we think that now is a good time, unless this is, again, purely a workshopping for the future 6th edition that they're planning to release. Again, take that with a grain of salt. That's just what I've heard. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you like what I do here, consider subscribing to the channel. I do my best to stay up to date on the news and break whatever news I can as fast as I can to all of you so you can stay informed and make informed decisions. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.